podcast is supported by the film Emilia Perez, winner of 4 Golden Globe Awards, including Best Picture, and nominated for 10 Critics' Choice Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director Jacques Audiard, starring Carla Sofia Gascon, Zoe Saldana, and Selena Gomez. ABC News raves it's an unmissable movie event. You've never seen anything like it. A cinematic editing feat with breathtaking cinematography, transformative hair and makeup, and bold musicality, featuring the Golden Globe-winning original song El Mal. Awards Watch calls Emilia Perez the best picture of the year. Hi, everybody. The Golden Globes have officially kicked off the most frantic period of award season yet. And today I am joined once again by Vanity Fair's David Canfield to talk about the highlights of Sunday night's show, including some really surprisingly excellent winners. Today I've also got a conversation with Guy Pearce. He is the star of one of the biggest winners at the Golden Globes, The Brutalist. I'm Katey Rich, and this is the Prestige Junkie Podcast. David Canfield, I'm so happy to be talking to you. I talked to you as we record like 12 hours ago at the Netflix party after the Golden Globes. It was the first time we got to watch you firsthand doing all of this coverage. It was quite a thing to see. How are you feeling? What's your exhaustion level after a night like the Golden Globes?
You know, I'm all right. It was a really busy weekend. I saw a lot of you, which was my favorite part of the weekend. Mm-hmm. But you know, it's there's nothing like Globes weekend when Globes weekend is in full force. So you're just going from thing to thing to thing to thing, and we can't complain.
Yes, no, this week is going to be completely relentless. Oscar voting will end next Sunday, right before the Critics' Choice Awards start. There's so much to get into. But let's drill into the Golden Globes. You were in the room. I was not. Although, as far as I understand, as press being in the room is a little bit of a metaphor.
We're watching on TV, too. I got news for you.
Yeah, so you're in the back of the room. I mean, you at least get a better sense in the room, I think, of how the show is playing as a show itself. You know, I'm watching at home, but I think the vibes in the room can be very different. I think last year with Joe Coy as a host, it was very evident how the vibes in the room were different. But from everything I'm hearing, it seems like Nikki Glaser did the TV version and the in the room version pretty well.
For me, you could not draw a more dramatic contrast from last year to this year. Just the experience of being in the room, sitting through the opening monologue. Last year when Joe Coy did whatever he did, I was uncomfortable. I was very quiet. I wanted to run out of the room. And you could look around and just see faces scowling or reacting in a kind of bemused horror. It was just it was so strange. I'd never had an experience like that, to watch someone bomb to that extent in front of so many famous people.
Yeah.
And this year, and Nikki Glaser talked a lot about this in the lead up to the show, she knew how to work the room. She knew how to get the room on her side very quickly. She knew how to be cutting without alienating people. And it was a joy. It was like being at a big comedy club, honestly. It was like, it was also the right tone with the movies, and her appreciation for the work there and her appreciation for being in that room was something you could feel. And I know that's something that you and I have talked a lot about over the years, is having a host who actually wants to be there and conveys that. And like,
when she drops a reference to Tedesco in front of the conclave table, you're like, you were there, you understand.
That was perfect. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, is somebody who knew her audience and knew how to work that, while also, I think, crafting jokes, you know, for those who are familiar with her work on roasts, that were broader and more in the spirit of how her comedy fans have come to know her.
Yeah. Something I realized only after the fact that I thought was so smart is in that opening monologue, she got Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande to kind of play along with a little pinky holding moment. And she got Timothée Chalamet with this
Adam
thing
Sandler,
and with Adam Sandler. And none of them won. I think we went into the night thinking like, oh, these big stars might win some awards, and we'll talk about the winners. But getting that focus on the stars of, you know, very famous stars in very popular movies, like that's what that monologue needs to do above all. It needs to get a chance to scan the room and see all the people who were there, and them playing along, I feel like told everyone like, no, we're good. We're going to like go with this year. And it worked great.
I think she specifically had singled out Timothée Chalamet and the Wicked folks as people she was going to be targeting early. Like, she made that very clear before the show even started, which I also think is smart. Like, I'm coming in here, I'm talking about the big movies and the big stars, and they're going to play along. And they did.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to have a night where, Amelia Perez, which I think is probably safe to say has been seen by fewer people than Wicked, wins all of the awards, like you want to make sure it's clear from the start that the Wicked people are there too.
That's correct. And they got their moment on stage, but only one.
That's true. While we're talking about the show craft, I do like Nikki Glaser, I think, did a great job. The camera angles part of it, you could see that in the room too. You're watching the same thing on the screen where Seth Rogen's talking about how he would have covered up his bald spot if he'd known that, John Lithgow could see it from behind him.
Thank God for Seth Rogen.
Oh my God. There was just a real aspect of stop trying to reinvent everything. It's the thing I think we've, complained about together for years is that everyone feels like award shows had to be fresh and updated, but there's just only so many things you can do. And whatever they were trying there with the presenters, I felt like was so distracting from everything that was going really well.
For me, I was sitting basically in Siberia, but you could see through the corner, through the gap between these pillars, the stage, and you could see the camera at the far end of the stage, but very close to the presenters who are also on a very far end of the stage. And I mean, it looked ridiculous from that vantage point. I mean, we could also see the TVs, and at least it didn't look completely stupid, but it still is so clearly awkward and not, in the middle of the room. I genuinely do not understand what that is meant to accomplish because it just feels weird.
Yeah, there's just nothing natural about presenter banter in the first place or award shows. So it's just stick with what has worked for a long time. And maybe that makes me sound like a traditionalist. We haven't seen the ratings, so who knows? Maybe somehow this made it feel fresher and newer, but it was a weird choice overall.
And they're not talking to the room. They're talking to a wall. And so, and you do feel that in the room. The sound quality was also a little off. As you know, for those in the room, when you're running a news desk, when Seth Rogen got bleeped, we were asked what got bleeped, and I was like, I have no idea. I didn't hear more words than you. So that became a problem, and it was just in general, it felt at times like a show that was not for the room.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, so we're going to get into the winners, and maybe we'll talk about TV winners first, which were a little less boring. But when you get a good win, when you get something that everyone feels excited about, do you feel the room coming back? Demi Moore as the big obvious example, that has to feel electrifying in person, no matter what production snafus have preceded it.
You could hear a pin drop. I mean, honestly, where I was, everyone was listening. Everyone was pretty rapt. And those are the moments and there were a lot this year, honestly, that make the Globes fun and exciting is they set the tone for the season, and they establish in many ways the narratives that are going to go through all the way to Oscar night. And Demi Moore, I thought she gave the best speech of the night. Pretty much everybody I talked to at the Globes, at the parties after, agreed. And it was one that affirmed what her candidacy means, not only to her, but to the industry and what her career, how do you put her career in the context of a movie like The Substance?
Yeah, and it's something she's been doing this whole time through all of her interviews, and you haven't been able to see it on a big screen like this. And we were talking at the Netflix party afterwards about how it feels like she's peaking in her campaign at this exact moment. And I can't really put my finger on how. The Substance had its box office run in the fall. She hasn't been invisible, but all of those narratives are coalescing through hard work from her. She's been so focused talking about what it took to get to this point. And it just, whoever gets the credit for kind of this masterful moment, it's all working out for her, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, I've moderated a few Q&As with her, and having just seen her in action, I wasn't surprised by how good her speech was or by how, honestly, beautifully she connected this moment to her legacy in Hollywood. It's something that has been defining from the very beginning, even in Cannes when the movie first premiered. I think that in terms of why now, she has benefited certainly from the fact that nobody else has emerged in Best Actress, despite having a lot of big names circling that category and having Wicked have this unbelievable moment that seems to have cooled off a little bit. She's always been there. It was one of the earliest premieres of any contender for Best Actress this year. And it's a story that has seemed to really steadily gain steam. And then there is that moment at the Globes where you're like, oh, right. This makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. That is the power of the Globes. We've talked amongst ourselves for years about do the Globes matter? Why do they matter? They're not handed out by people who are in the Academy. But that moment of seeing someone holding a statue and saying, oh yeah, wait a second, that's how this should go. Like nothing is like the Globes in clarifying that in some way. I would imagine it's the same for Zoe Saldana, who gave the first speech of the night. Not really a similar story to Demi Moore, but when Demi Moore says she was written off as a popcorn actress, like you just know that's something Zoe Saldana has probably heard at some point in her career. And both of those speeches, you watch them and you just think, oh, no, this makes sense. This is how this is going to go.
And it's something that Zoe has talked about in a different sort of way, just not, really respecting those projects and being honored to be a part of them, but not getting the chance to be seen in a different light. And I think that is what links those two speeches, those two candidacies for sure. The other thing that is beneficial about being in the room, no matter where you're sitting, is you get to see what happens after they win. And Demi and Zoe particularly, the amount of Academy members that I saw approaching them on the floor, because let's not forget, that room on TV side too is filled with people who vote for Oscars. There was that joke about Colin Farrell and Cate Blanchett being contenders for TV, but they are there and they are also paying attention to the Oscar race. And I saw Edward Norton have this really lovely moment with Demi, and that also speaks to what happens when a speech really lands is people in that room who are thinking about who to vote for are moved as we are. And that matters. And I think with Zoe, it's the same thing. She's worked with so many people. She's never been close to this conversation before. And there is that moment where it kind of clicks.
Yeah, and there's this aspirational aspect to these awards for the people who are voting on them. You moderate these events with Academy members or SAG members, and these people who have made it in their careers to a point that they're in these groups. But most of them are not on the level of Demi Moore or Zoe Saldana. And to see that you can get to this level of achievement but still lack something and still need a validation in the sense that you can give it to somebody, like it all kind of fits into that, Hollywood narrative of itself and rewarding these people. And they both have strong narratives. Despite being incredibly successful, they have this striving narrative to their stories that feels really powerful.
Not to pivot to another winner, but you saying that makes me think of a Q&A I'd done with the cast of The Brutalist, and specifically Adrian Brody, who won Best Actor in a Drama, because so much of this Q&A, which was for SAG, was centered on how lucky he and Guy Pearce and Felicity Jones felt to get the chance to play roles like this. And they would address their answers to the people in the room, how hard it is to even see something like this come across your desk. And when you do get it across your desk that you have to do it and you have to do the best job. And he was talking about how he has so many friends who haven't had the kind of career he's gotten to have, and that even still he feels that way, and it's been so long since he's had a role like this. And there is 100% that communication with their peers of why this matters and why they can join in that embrace.
Yeah. Okay, so were you surprised that Adrian Brody wound up winning? The Brutalist won 3 awards. It had a ton of nominations. I think you knew it was going to do pretty well. It won for Best Director and Picture Drama as well. I thought Timothée Chalamet was going to walk home with that. So when Adrian Brody won that award, I had this kind of interesting thought that the Best Actor race might be even more in flux than I realized.
I did predict Adrian Brody. I was happy that I saw that one coming. I think that with the new expanded membership of the Globes, which leans a little bit more highbrow, a little bit more international, and honestly, a little bit less desiring of getting that big celebrity moment on stage. Sure. We'll talk about Fernando Torres in a moment. But all of that to say, I wasn't sure how fully they would go for what I think is a very good American studio music biopic.
In the complete unknown, yeah.
In a complete unknown versus The Brutalist, which they gave the most nominations of any drama, has been kind of the toast of a lot of critics groups, like winning New York Film Critics, dominating a lot of those regional critics lists. It just seemed like the kind of movie that would be really up their alley, and a way for them to elevate that as a serious top-tier contender for picture and actor. And so it did make sense to me. I think it was close. I think it will continue to be close. My feeling is it's a kind of a dead heat between them. And
between the two of them at this point. Yeah. No, that seems like I think we had talked earlier in the weekend about Conclave and whether or not we were kind of sleeping on that. And Ray Fiennes kind of emerging out of that somehow. I don't think that's still impossible. But in terms of individual actor narratives, the Brody versus Chalamet, they're just two gigantic performances. Like, not to diminish what Ralph Fiennes or Coleman Domingo or Sebastian Stan for that matter does, but you can kind of see how it would come down to the two of them.
The word monumental has been thrown around a lot with The Brutalist, but that really applies to that performance. And I mean, in my opinion, it's a pretty staggering feat. And when I saw A Complete Unknown, a movie that I was really kind of dispassionate and reluctant about, and I was really, really taken with it.
Yeah,
and
same.
I think it's so much because of him and how it's the best example of, like, you see how all that work paid off. I mean, he's talked about how he spent years training to play Bob Dylan, and it just kind of disappears into it in this really lovely way.
I still feel like it feels right for Timothée Chalamet to win an Oscar for this. Like, cosmically, it makes sense. He would become the youngest Best Actor winner, beating Adrian Brody. Like, it all adds up. But, like, that doesn't always work out that way. So, I don't know. I think the dead heat is exactly right.
I agree.
You mentioned Fernando Torres earlier. I just threw out Sebastian Stan. Like, just in general, we're talking about these new Globe voters and their taste. They did so well on all of these movie awards. Like, again, maybe we'll get to TV later, but like the winners were just kind of top to bottom excellent. I was so impressed by it. And I guess it makes them feel more like a critics group, and critics groups I tend to align with more. But on this big stage, giving a moment to Sebastian Stan, to Fernando Torres, like it was great. It was such a fun thing to watch over and over again, just being delightfully surprised.
Yeah, and surprised, but not in the way of, like, again, a giant celebrity just getting it because that makes all the sense in the world. I mean, the lead acting winners were Demi Moore for The Substance, Adrian Brody for The Brutalist, Fernando Torres for I'm Still Here, and Sebastian Stan for A Different Man.
Yeah.
Crazy inspired list to me.
Yeah.
And
those are 4 small movies that, like, all to some extent need that boost. I guess The Substance has probably made the most money of any of them.
Yeah, and A Different Man has certainly made the least, I would think. But the thing with A Different Man and that win is Sebastian Stan has had an incredible year. And I was talking to some friends about this. Like, I don't know if that win helps him to get an Oscar nomination or not, because he has this weird problem of having 2 great performances that are kind of toggling back and forth. But that vote did feel like a vote for his year more than the movie, which they didn't recognize elsewhere, and which, while you and I love that movie, is very small.
Sure. Yeah, he wasn't. I mean, he was nominated in 2 categories, so he wasn't competing against himself for that win there. But do you still feel like, so we've been talking about this Best Actor lineup of like 4 locks and then that 5th slot that's still wide open. Do you feel like you have any more clarity on where that 5th slot goes to now?
I mean, I think Sebastian Stan has a really good chance. I'm curious to see what SAG does. I kind of feel like Hugh Grant is going to pop up there again. He got the Critics' Choice nomination over Sebastian Stan, I presume, because Sebastian Stan was splitting votes.
Split his own vote, yeah.
And there's no reason to think that would not continue, since I think The Apprentice is the stronger movie, but A Different Man has been gaining some steam. It won the Gotham. It's been on a lot of critics lists. Like, it has found its champions. So unfortunately, I guess, for Sebastian Stan, his movie's doing well. Damn.
Yeah. Well, and so is The Apprentice. You know, I think The Apprentice got a bunch of Indie Spirits nominations. So it was like, if one of them could just pull ahead in the pack, but it just keeps feeling like it's not happening.
Yeah. And then Daniel Craig's still there too, and he's running a pretty robust campaign. And I think that movie is really tough in an awards context. I'm a fan of that movie, but I would not be surprised if it just is too alienating to people. Yeah.
Although there is one Luca Guadagnino movie winning awards, and that would be Challengers. That score when, I don't know what there is to say about it, like Oscar buzz-wise, because, you know, Reznor and Ross have 2 Oscars already. Like, they're in the club, but I was as delighted as Elton John. When,
I was going to say, all there is to say is that Elton John was elated, which made me elated.
Do you think he's friends with Atticus Ross? Like, I'm just very curious about the backstory there.
Maybe I thought about it a lot. I was like, was he following the predictions, and was he pleasantly surprised? Was he just holding out for Challengers? Is he a big Challengers fan? Was it an Atticus Ross?
He should be a big Challengers fan.
Thing? I don't know, but whatever it was, it made that, to me, surprise feel even more special. Yeah.
I mean, Fernando Torres, I think we talked amongst ourselves. We've probably talked on this podcast before. Best Actress is just kind of like miserably crowded this year. It's Marianne Jean-Baptiste, who we both love, wasn't even nominated at the Golden Globes. I'm still holding firm to thinking she's going to get in at the Oscars as well. I have no idea what to make of if Fernando Torres is now more of a threat. I mean, I guess she has to be, because I'm Still Here is so small. It's barely even out in the U.S. at this point. But I don't know. I love that performance so much. And there's just someone who I love is going to get snubbed in that Best Actress Oscar lineup.
I think she's extremely competitive now, just purely based on the calendar. Like, it's a movie that everyone I know, whether in the Academy or you or whoever who sees it, is really knocked out by her performance. And it's like a fun vote because it's someone who has not been in this conversation before, but who is in this movie that has been getting a really strong campaign from Sony Pictures Classics, that you want to recognize, that you want to see crash the race a little bit. And so seeing that, you know, to most people, a big surprise, winning over Nicole Kidman and Angelina Jolie, leading right into Oscar voting. And I'm sure a lot of Oscar voters have not seen the film, but have friends who have seen the film and love the film. Like, that kind of word of mouth could not be cresting at a more ideal time. That said, do I think she's a lock for a nomination? I don't think anyone is a lock for a nomination now. It's just crazy.
Is Demi Moore?
I think Demi may be like the biggest lock at this point after that.
But like 2 days ago, would you have called her for a lock nomination? Probably not.
I was feeling better about her, but I would not have called her a lock. I would have called Mikey Madison a lock, and I still feel very good about her for nomination, but I think it's pretty clear that Honora has cooled a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we all expected at some point, right? Like, it was riding high off the Palme d'Or for so long, and it's not like it's a divisive movie. It's not like Nickel Boys or like The Substance or something where people can kind of argue about it, but it's just not it's not like Conclave or Complete Unknown or even The Brutalist in some ways where you can kind of like show it in this broadly appealing way. I mean, it's a challenging movie. It was made to be a challenging movie.
It's a Sean Baker
that kind
movie.
of makes sense. Yeah. Like, for a Sean Baker movie to get this far is something, like, we got our hearts broken so many times before on Sean Baker movies in the past. I kind of hope it would win. I think someone asked us at the party last night, like, are you surprised Nora got nothing? And it was like, I don't know what I like thought it should have won. Screenplay, I guess, being the obvious one. And I still feel like it would be pretty competitive at the Oscars, but I don't know what is the roadmap I would write for Nora at this point.
I was really surprised it did not win screenplay, because they nominated it so much, but they also nominated Conclave a lot, and clearly they felt it was more important to get Conclave that moment on stage than to give that to Nora. In terms of its best picture path, I think it's a screenplay, actress, picture trio. I mean, that seems, but it's not going to get a lot of nominations. Even on its best day, it's just, that's how it is for those smaller, more character-driven films. And it's not a movie that has the commercial breadth of some of these other contenders, like you mentioned. And I was thinking about that watching the Globes, like, a lot of people have seen a lot of these movies. Like, Conclave made over $30 million in the U.S., Complete Unknown is a big hit, to say nothing of Wicked or some of these other films. So a lot, and Amelia Perez, I don't think it did that well on Netflix, but it's on Netflix. It's very readily available.
Now is its moment, right?
And now
this is when
moment.
people will start watching Amelia Perez. I saw a big ad for it during the broadcast last night.
Right. So all of these things point to this is an audience-friendly year. And while Honora did quite well for, I think it made a little under 15 domestically so far, it's not at the level of those other films. And it's not, say a Moonlight either, where it can ride this incredible kind of underdog narrative.
Yeah. Okay. So talking about it being an audience-friendly year, I was already arguing with another friend who thinks that giving all this attention to Amelia Perez, a movie that is popular but not popular, instead of Wicked, is a problem. That the idea of these award shows, like going after the smaller, more challenging, less broadly appealing movie when you've got something right there that more people like, is kind of shooting itself in the foot. The Golden Globes are not the way they used to be. I think, the Globes of 10 years ago probably would have done a Wicked sweep.
For sure.
I mean, do you feel like they can get away with saying we're an audience-friendly award season if Wicked gets blanked at the end of all of this?
Well, you're forgetting that it won Cinematic and Box Office Achievement, the most important award of the whole evening. I mean, to me, it's a healthy sign. It's a sign that they're not voting for the moment on stage. It's that they're voting for their favorites. I don't think the internet will be thrilled necessarily with what their favorites are in that particular case, but it is an authentic choice. And I've been saying this about Amelia Perez a lot. There are so many different kinds of groups at this point that have said, yes, this is our favorite movie of the year, or this is one of our favorite movies of the year, that there does need to be some taking a step back to be like, a lot of different people, particularly in the industry, love this movie, and that just has to be accepted. I mean,
it's not something that like 100 people have decided is going to be an Oscar contender. It doesn't work that way.
It does not work that way. And so the Globes are, my point there being, the Globes are not the first group to make this declaration. Greta Gerwig's Cannes jury was. And it's come a long way since then, and it will continue to go a long way.
Yeah, I love because Barbie won the Cinematic Achievement Award last year. The Greta Gerwig effect continues. I mean, I'm also not willing to write off Wicked as a Best Picture winner. Like, I've gone back and forth on it over the entire holidays. It was just like, is this just what's going to happen? And I think we were both agreeing that at Critics' Choice on Sunday, somehow Critics' Choice, I think, would go more for Wicked than Golden Globes, which is not at all how it would have gone 5 years ago. But I that still feels right to me. Like, Ariana Grande could very much still win. It could still win Best Director for all I know. John Chu gave a great speech accepting that Cinematic and Box Office Achievement Award. So I don't think it's over for Wicked at all.
I don't think it is either. I just think the Globes are extremely international now, actually international now, even though they used to have international in their name. And they're just not going to go for a big, colorful Hollywood musical that hasn't even been that much of a success internationally. It just didn't really...
Oh, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, it's been a much bigger hit domestically. So it didn't really track that would be where it would happen, to me at least. But Critics' Choice, SAG, that is their bread and butter. And I would be shocked if it does not win a big award at those places.
Yeah, I mean, something we were saying last night talking to some other colleagues is like, I don't feel any clearer on what's going to win Best Picture after the Golden Globes. Like, not that you should. The Golden Globes is a different voting body, but, you know, there's like, I feel clear about who's going to win Best Supporting Actor. Watching Kieran Culkin accept his award, you're like, okay, yes, all the pieces are falling into place there. But more broadly, it's much harder.
Yeah, picture, if Conclave won Best Drama, I would have felt pretty comfortable putting that in my top slot. But The Brutalist has just kind of inherent challenges as a 3.5-hour movie, number one. But one that, you know, it's the preferential ballot problem. It's the same that Amelia Perez is going to face. And so the fact that these two movies won here and have been doing quite well for some time, they're absolutely in it. But it's very hard to say they've got this when you do have movies like Conclave and Wicked nipping at their heels.
Whatever wins Best Picture, I just feel like it's going to happen it's going to be like 4th round voting. Like, it's just going to be a skin of the teeth victory no matter what it is, which is not to say anything bad of whatever wins. It's just how this year is. I may have said this on another podcast that I host, but how fun is the idea that at the Critics' Choice Awards a week from now, you could have Timothée Chalamet win instead of Adrian Brody, Ariana Grande win instead of Zoe Saldana, Mikey Madison,
yes, Honora or something else for Best Picture. I mean, it truly could be a completely different set of winners, and it's kind of what I'm expecting, honestly.
I know.
And that's fun.
Yeah. Well, and then, again, when you get in the question of like, why do we have all these precursors? Like, why do the Golden Globes get to do this? It's because everyone gets a chance. Like, you look at Sebastian Stan winning that Golden Globe for a Different Man, it means something to him. And he probably knows it's not the same as an Oscar, but it's still a recognition. Demi Moore said it so beautifully. Like, all of these awards, when you have a year as widespread as this, like that, it validates it more than like an Oppenheimer sweep where you just see the same people over again. It makes it the recognition meaningful in some way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, on that note, I did want to end by talking about TV, where it was the opposite. Where the Golden Globes TV Awards, once upon a time, they would give fun awards to people on new shows like Gina Rodriguez or Rachel Bloom or something.
Kyle Garcia Bernal, Mozart in the Jungle, my favorite.
Mozart in the Jungle, an iconic Golden Globes winner. And they just rubber stamped the heck out of all of last year's Emmy winners. A couple of exceptions. Colin Farrell gave this fantastic speech, thanked craft services. God bless him. But, you know, Jeremy Allen White winning Best Actor in a Comedy and not even showing up just felt just very like, what are we doing here? Like, do we just need to make sure they watch more TV? Like, what's the solution?
I genuinely think they have a problem here. Like, and I think that this is something that the Critics' Choice Awards are dealing with too. Part of it is an issue of consensus. It's a larger group now. And because TV's so fragmented, like the front runners win. Like we see this at the Emmys. The Emmys did better than usual this past year, but it was still like Baby Reindeer, Hacks. Well, Hacks was a surprise at the time. And Shogun. But yeah, now we're just in this cycle that was the exact same as last year when it was Beef and Succession and The Bear. They won everything. And now it's these three. And it's It's really boring. And when you have a film award season as dynamic as this one, and you're infusing it with like Jessica Gunning, who's terrific in Baby Reindeer, winning again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough. I got way too excited about Tadanobu Asano winning for the show that won everything else just because he didn't win the Emmy. So at least it was a little different. But that was hardly the most inspired choice. I mean, I predicted that because I knew Shogun would do well.
Yeah, well, and you don't want them to like vote for novelty's sake. Like that's how you get weird winners. But again, like the whole point of having multiple award shows is that you get to spread out a little bit. And, you know, if the Golden Globes have this time difference from the Emmys, like they get to nominate Nobody Wants This or Black Doves or something like that. Like use the advantage of your spot in the calendar, especially for TV where it's not like it's being followed by another set of awards in a few weeks. Like you've got time before the Emmys. Like plant your flag, do something weird. Like whoever decided Fernando Torres should win, it feels like they didn't have the same impulse on TV, and they need to get that straight.
I would never not want Anna Sawai and Hiroyuki Sanada to win anything because I love Shogun deeply. But the fact that Keira Knightley and Ben Whishaw are not Golden Globes winners for Black Doves, there's just something about that doesn't sound right to me. Like that should have happened. And in another era,
so glad
it would
we got
have
to
happened.
Black Doves, our shared Christmas experience of watching Black Doves.
That was all you. You pulled that in my direction.
I will say, at the Netflix party, I think you had left already. Hiroyuki Sanada kind of showed up at the last minute, and what a gorgeous man to behold in person.
Yeah,
so I was
got that
happy.
Aura.
He really does. I mean, the winners walking around those parties. I watched Jessica Gunning like go up to like say hello to Tilda Swinton, which was like give them a project together. Like let many things bloom from these award shows.
Truly.
Well, David, you'll be at the Critics' Choice Awards on Sunday, so people can like follow you. I mean, obviously, everyone should still listen to Little Gold Men and this show. Essential twin heads of award season coverage. These two shows, and yeah, good luck out there. I hope you have time to get your text dry clean before you have to do this all over again.
It's in process right now.
I will be right back after this break with my conversation with Guy Pearce. This podcast is supported by Netflix, presenting Will and Harper, the Best Documentary Feature winner at the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards. Out calls it a documentary that can truly shift public opinion, and the Washington Post's Jada Yuan hails it vital and life-saving. Featuring the original song Harper and Will Go West from Kristen Wiig. Will and Harper for your awards consideration. Till the end. My guest on this week's podcast, Guy Pearce, has been working in the movie industry long enough to share some really succinct and really good advice in our conversation. He told me the less money there is, the more creative you get to be. That was definitely true with several of his breakthrough projects, including the Australian indie The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert back in 1994, and his starring role in Christopher Nolan's breakthrough film Memento in 2000. And it's also true of The Brutalist. It's the film that's earned Pearce Golden Globe and Critics' Choice nominations for Best Supporting Actor, and it just took home 3 major Golden Globes, including Best Picture Drama. In The Brutalist, Pearce plays the kind of character he's really nailed a few times before. He's this clean-cut kind of weaselly guy. He's a millionaire in 1950s Pennsylvania, and he hires Adrien Brody's character, who's an architect and a refugee from the Holocaust, and he's hired to build his dream project on this hill in Pennsylvania. So Guy Pearce swears to me that everything he needed to find the character was right there in the script by director Brady Corbet, which he wrote with Mona Fastvold. But Guy Pearce definitely brings a lot to this character, including this simmering envy of Adrien Brody's character, who is a real artist when, Guy Pearce's guy, even though he has everything, he can't quite have that. That's one of a few ways that The Brutalist also works as a metaphor for the film industry about what it takes to make art and the people who will actually give you the money to do it. And so it was really interesting to talk to Guy Pearce about his own journey through this business, including a string of what he calls his divorce movies made a while back, and then how he learned to protect his sanity when he broke out as a star on Australian TV when he was still a teenager. So you can hear it all in my conversation with the star of The Brutalist, Guy Pearce. to start with, when you've talked about The Brutalist in other interviews, you said it kind of came to you in a pretty typical way through your representatives. You get the script. This is kind of a classic format. And I wonder if at this point you have kind of a process for yourself when just a script comes to you to sit down with it, to kind of figure out what you want in it, to know if it resonates with you in some way. Like, do you have a system for taking on something new like that?
I don't have a system that feels conscious. It's just a matter of reading it and seeing what response I have, to be honest, like reading a book. I'm a slow reader, so, people can send me scripts and I'm aware that I take a while to get back to them.
They think you're trying to play hard to get and you're just taking your time.
Well, I think people just think that you're sitting around with nothing to do all day long and that every time they send you a script, the first thing you're going to do is start reading it. And I've always got a pile of about 10 scripts that I haven't got to yet.
Sure.
People say, hey, I'm sending you this script. If you can read it by the weekend, that'd be great. And so I'm like, I can't, sorry. Having said that, there are just certain ones that come your way. Usually my agent will have one or two things to say about it when it does come my way, and some things move to the top of the pile. This was one of those where I hadn't seen Brady's films before, but my agent had, and obviously talked very highly of his work and of him. And it was pretty clear from the outset that this was one of the good ones and something to be taken seriously. But also that's because of Brady's and Mona's ability to realise characters in their full form, which as an actor is always what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
I can read a character and think, okay, interesting character, their journey is interesting, but I don't see it fully formed yet. I'm going to have to do some work here to try and construct a character, which I never want to have to do. That's not my job, I don't reckon. That's the right
Interesting.
job. So,
because I feel like so often you'll hear actors, talk about like diving into character backstories. Obviously, everyone has a different approach to it, but it sounds like you want to take what's on the page almost entirely. Absolutely.
I'm much more inspired by being inspired than I am in having to join the writing team. No offense, but, I trust myself more. I don't trust myself. If I'm having to make decisions about the character, then there are questions of trust. I don't trust myself. Whereas if I read something that is fully formed, then I just have to get on board and execute what the script is asking me to execute, which is what happened in this case.
Yeah, that question of trust is something I was asking actors about, because when you work with a director for the first time, even if everything's on the page and your job is clear, you've got to build that trust. You hadn't met Brady before you guys had that conversation after you read the script. How did he build that trust with you? What made you say that he could really follow through on, what you saw in his Mona script?
Well, he didn't have to build any trust. I just looked at his first two films.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I read that script. So there was no building that had to be done. It was already built. And on many ways, I see myself as a member of the orchestra, and someone hands you a Mozart symphony, and you play what you need to play.
Yeah,
and it's already formulated. I think there's too much of a disparity between theatre work and film work, where in theatre world scripts are far more developed and far more realised. In film world, we often get handed things when there should be more drafts done, I think. And I get it. That's just sort of the nature of it. But I know that all the best work that I've ever done, absolutely by far, without question, is when the writer has created the character and I'm not creating the character.
I mean, you work a lot, like you still do. You're obviously not every set you're going to go on is going to be the most put together. And it sounds like you've kind of learned to roll with that and find your way through. Sometimes you get a Brutalist where all the pieces are in place and sometimes you don't. But you're managing to, it's worth it to kind of bounce to all these different sets and find something different because you find something out of it, even if all the pieces are in place.
Well, that's right. And sometimes I'll see 80% of a character, and then after 3 more conversations with the director, I'll fully get a sense of the character. So then it happens like that.
Yeah.
And, in many ways with Brady, I didn't even have to have any conversations because he put everything down on the page.
Yeah.
And other times I'll get a script where 40% of the character is there, and I'll talk to the director and we'll get it up to about 60%. And then I've got to sort of add some on top, but I'm only ever really at about 70 or 75. That last 5% is a bit of a question in my mind anyway. And maybe it sort of works in the end, but I just don't feel like I did my best work. Again, my best work is in films like LA Confidential and Mildred Pierce and The Proposition and Memento, where the writer has gone, here is a person. Look at this person.
Sure.
And I just go, oh, wow, look at that person.
Yeah.
So,
how do you feel? I mean, you're naming your films that have been gotten the level of acclaim that matches you thinking it's your best work. How often do you think that if you do the best work that people notice it in the same way? Do you feel like there are some where you really nailed it and the film didn't land the way that it should have?
Well, I look at films like Death Defying Acts that I did with Catherine Zeta-Jones and Saoirse, and because Harvey had that film and he ruined it for us,
sure,
no one saw the movie. I think the film's really beautiful. Gillian Armstrong is a wonderful filmmaker. The character was beautifully realised on the page. It was a very solid and wonderful, glorious story. And because of the way the film was released, nobody saw it.
Yeah.
So there's an example.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like with any long career, there's always going to be something like that, right?
Yeah. And then there are those other ones where, you do something and it's kind of crappy. And for some reason, it just gains traction. And it's like people keep saying to me, oh, I saw that film, Disturbing the Peace. I'm like, really? That's the one you've watched twice now? Wow. Okay.
He's going to put a DVD in their hands.
Well, one of my divorce movies, if I look at the sort of 6 or 7 movies I did when I was going through divorce, purely to pay for the divorce, they're the ones I'm not wanting people to kind of go, yeah, I saw that again. Like, great.
I feel like people, so often we can guess that looking at a career. It's very rare to hear it from the other side. So
that's right.
Thank you for clarifying it. Well, but it also ties into what The Brutalist is about. I think Brady has said this kind of plainly, it's about trying to make art in a capitalist system. It's about the people who are going to hold the purse strings and keep you from making what you want to make or tell you what they want you to make. And I don't know how much of that was important to you. You're playing the guy holding the purse strings. If you talked to Brady about that, but if you found your own resonance in kind of this story about what it means to make art, just kind of a different art than what you've been making.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the thing that I've learned over the years, it feels like the less money there is, the more creative you get to be. Mm-hmm. Which kind of makes sense because I suppose people with lots of money think that they can make something great. They think they can make a kind of classic. And sometimes they do. So, within the studio system, sometimes, having big budgets and being able to pull in the best actors and the best writers can actually lead to great work.
Well, LA Confidential probably being a prime example.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't really know, I don't really know even what the budget of that was. But there are plenty of examples where having lots of money doesn't lead to great work. And, often if you don't have any money, people are forced to think a little bit harder and try a little bit harder. So, it's an odd sort of situation, I suppose, where art and commerce are banging up against each other. And, I don't know that anyone really does have the answer to it, but I certainly know that it isn't a given that just because you have more money means you're going to make a better product or make a better piece of work, or a more honest piece of work.
Yeah. I mean, when people learned the budget of The Brutalist was about $10 million, their jaws kind of hit the floor. It seems incredible that it was made for that little.
Well, and I think part of that is because the film gives off a real powerful sense of gravitas and integrity, and that's a combination of Brady's great writing, Brady's unique directing, Daniel's score, Judy's production design, Lol's cinematography, and the themes in the movie. It certainly didn't feel when we were making the film that we were ever rushed. Not to me. It certainly didn't feel like we didn't ever have the money to do what we needed to do. I mean, I'm sure if you talk to Brady about that, he would have more to say about it than I'm aware of.
Sure.
But I can tell you on set, Brady was so relaxed and so easy with us and so encouraging and always filled us with confidence. And there was always time for another one if we wanted another one. And so he really gave off this vibe that, that what he needed to do and what we ever needed was what we were able to do.
Yeah.
And then the film is just magically and beautifully sort of coalesced into this larger-than-life, epic, grand story. So I think that adds to the disbelief when people find out the budget was only, as you say, 10 mil or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the effect when you guys go to Carrara, Italy, like that place is so otherworldly, and that location is there. It's not like you had to build these marble mines.
It didn't cost Brady any more to choose where to put the camera.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was his choice of camera position that makes that place look what it looks like.
I mean, do you feel like you're in outer space when you're climbing up those hills and, with the chunk taken out of them?
It was a pretty confronting and awe-inspiring experience. We were driven up to the top of this ravine and through the fog. The fog sort of added something to it. And I remember actually a couple of the producers on the day were going, such a shame that it's foggy because when we came and recce'd this, the sun was out. It looked incredible. The sun was bouncing off all this white marble. But of course now everybody says, well, in actual fact, that mist, that fog really adds to it because it just creates a certain mystique. And I remember at the time being really overwhelmed by the enormity of the place, but also the devastation that's been caused, that we do these horrendous things to natural places just so we can have a nice kitchen bench. And it's been happening for 500 years there.
Yeah.
So it was quite confronting, to be honest, that experience,
Yeah. There's this physicality to your character that I was noticing when I was revisiting the movie. And it's not like there's like dance or anything in this movie, but there's this posture and kind of neck position and all this stuff that has this kind of pretension, rich guy quality to it. I can't put my finger on it. But I don't know if you had like a dance background or dance training or any point, but it does feel like there's this like physical sense of how you change yourself to become somebody. And I wondered how that worked into this specifically.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I just tend to sort of react. I feel like my body tends to, and I'm quite a physical actor, I suppose, in that I need to get up on my feet soon and sort of start, finding it through my body. And I feel like it just sort of naturally occurs. If the character is well realised on the page, then I just suddenly sort of imagine myself as that character and my body will change the positioning of how my shoulders are and what kind of room I take up in the room and, what it does to my voice. So it's hard to know sometimes because it's quite spontaneous and quite organic.
So is that something you could like identify, like in a conversation with somebody, explain what you do? It just kind of feels like it
No,
comes
I don't.
out.
I never feel like I always sort of say the best way for me to express a character is to play the character. I can never actually articulate what it is I really do, to be honest. I can sort of see technically the few things, and I certainly get that with someone like Van Buren, he himself is presentational. He himself is controlling and wanting to have the power in the room, and that's how he identifies himself. But it also, I'm always looking at the insecurities of a character and what it is they're masking and what it is they're running from and what it is they're struggling with, because that plays a big part in what a character portrays. The levels of consciousness and subconscious behaviour is there's a lot going on, as there is for all of us in our daily lives anyway, when you walk into a room. And the great thing about film, obviously, is, you have public moments and you have private moments. So to see a character on their own in a room where they might actually genuinely sort of question what's going on, depends how moral or ethical they are, etc.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on that if I feel like I have to have too many conversations about all that stuff to try and understand it, then I'm just carrying around a whole lot of intellectual homework. Whereas if I'm just feeling it off the page, then it just sort of happens. And again, that's why I do my best work in those situations, because it's all natural and organic as opposed to a constructed, formed kind of person.
Intellectualizing it instead of just doing it.
And I get that people who are not actors, even though I think all of us are actors to some degree.
Sure.
I get that they're the questions that people ask, because people say, what did you do to go about building your character? And I'd always prefer not to have to build a character, but just to respond.
Yeah. Do you think that instinctive response, like, you start acting when you're 18, right out of school, like, do you think that you just
acting when I was a kid?
Sure, that's true. But like professionally,
I was doing theater when I was 8.
You were so young when you started, and especially like at a professional level. Do you think that like when you're that young, you kind of just have to do it instinctively, and so that's how you learn how to do it then, and that's what sticks with you?
Well, I wasn't even thinking about how I had to do it. I just was It's the same thing as it is now, I suppose. It's just an intuitive response to character. It's this sort of compulsion to kind of imitate or to kind of understand someone else's journey as a sort of a being on this planet.
Yeah.
And sort of just stepping into their shoes and going, wow, this is happening to me. Look what I'm doing. Wow, fascinating, And it's so it sort of does connect to this desire to understand other people, which, the lovely byproduct of that is it helps me understand myself more as well, I think.
Yeah.
It's therapeutic acting.
Yeah. Do you have that interest in other people, like in books or just like walking through an airport? Do you think about how other people behave, or is it really just a professional interest in yours?
Totally.
You could have been a psychologist or an interviewer. Like that, I feel like I do interviews just to understand how other people work. It could have been the exact same thing.
You see what people are carrying in themselves. I'm always fascinated in what people are carrying, what people are burdened with, when they're carrying the weight of their history with them and how conscious they are of it, or how much of it is subconscious, so that's the stuff that you bring into work, that I sort of bring into work, when I'm playing a character, is what is it that they're carrying with them? What have they managed to shed? What do they not even see?
Do you feel like that's something you get from like working in the film industry also? Like there's something, you were saying earlier, all of us are actors. There's this presentational quality to making film and television and working in these industries. It feels like I don't know, if you can start seeing that in people, you'll start seeing it everywhere in this business in particular. Does that make sense? Like it's a world full of people and their insecurities and what they're carrying.
Well, it's not even about this industry. It's just all of us. When someone says to you, "How are you?" you make a either conscious or subconscious choice to either be completely honest about how you are, or you just say, "I'm good, thanks. How are you?" That in itself is a little moment of acting.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean when I say we're all actors, because we're all, I think, trying to either be more confident than we really are, or trying to be more or smarter than we really are, or whatever it is, or we're genuinely needing to kind of blurt out what's happening for us at this point in time, and sometimes we don't because other people go, "Oh no, I just asked you how you were. I didn't really know how you were." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just there's a dichotomy. There's a sort of a, there's therapy and then there's society, and the two things often kind of clash, So life's a tricky thing, and we're all dealing with interactions all the time, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're back in this position now with the Brutalist. Like, you've been, again, like working a lot, you've given interviews a lot, but it feels like you're doing press in a way, you're going to Venice on the red carpet, like you're kind of popping back up in a level of visibility that hadn't been in a while. Do you have to kind of, I don't know, take a deep breath and be like, okay, this is what this is going to be like. You've been down this road before. You're used to it. But does it take some deep breathing before you can go on the Venice red carpet or something like that?
Well, it does. Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's a good point. And I'm glad you sort of, you articulate it in that way, because funnily enough, I've had a number of people say to me recently, "Oh my God, you're back." And of course, my first response is, well, I didn't ever went anywhere. I was always working. But I realized that there's two jobs in this job. There's the job of making the film, and then there's the job of promoting the film.
Yeah.
And the job of promoting the film is kind of what people are talking about. It's and being part of something that is well recognised, and then you've got to go out and sort of promote more. I mean, really, you should be promoting the ones that aren't so well recognised.
They need the help. Yeah,
they need the help. This film I think will be fine without it. So I get it, and yes, you do sort of have to take a bit of a breath. You do have to. I mean, I also went to Cannes this year as well with David Cronenberg.
Oh yeah, of course, the Shrouds.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, after, 10 years of not going to these film festivals, I'm suddenly back at them and going to awards shows and kind of just, but it's in a way, it's good in a way, because I sort of feel like I'm coming back at it with a different attitude, just not taking it all so seriously and having fun with it and catching up. The great thing about going to film festivals and award shows is you see actors you haven't seen for years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you had talked in interviews a while ago about this period around like 2001, 2002, where you took a step back. You kind of learned not to take things so seriously again at that point. So it sounds like, I don't know, there's like a recalibration that you've been able to do every couple of years to be like, what am I in this for? Like,
well, I think you sort of have to. I think that, you know, as you mature anyway, and I've got a child now, I've got a beautiful 8-year-old son. And so, you know, he brings a whole new meaning to my life. And as far as what's important, obviously for him, but what's important for me. And it doesn't mean that the seriousness of what I do as an actor is diluted. In actual fact, it's probably even exacerbated in a way. But I think as long as I maintain a healthy sort of childlike quality to the work that I do, which was always the thing that I loved as a kid. You know, your imagination is sparked by a particular character. You get on board and you play that character, you express it, and then you put it down and walk away. So I think I'm just freshly reminded of that more and more as time and getting to play with my son and watching him sort of do the same thing. I don't mean being an actor, but just him sort of being sparked by his imagination is so glorious and wonderful, you know.
Yeah, we have sons about the same age. I also have an 8-year-old. And it's such a fun movie watching period of life. And I don't know if you guys go to the movies on a regular basis, but I've been trying to really show him anything good coming out this year. And I didn't know if you were in the same period as well, where you get to enjoy the same movies together, finally.
Well, I'm a bit behind. We just started watching Harry Potter. You know, I never watched Harry Potters at the time, but now we've just watched the first 2 and we're going on.
They hold up.
He's a little bit nervous because he's been told by some of his friends that they get scarier and scarier as they go on. So we'll see how he goes with that. I keep joking and sort of, you know, saying, well, I'll show you then we can watch The Proposition. And then we can watch
So he knows you've got some movies that he's not ready for yet.
Yeah, I'm 10 more years.
What are your movies that you would, I can't think of too many kid-friendly ones. I'm sure they're out there.
There's only 2. Well, there's 3. You know, there's Back to the Outback, the animated one that we did.
Honest to God, my son has watched that many, many times. There are a lot of Australian accents in our house.
Every time I go to pick up Monty from school, all his friends are like, do the voice, do Frank's voice. So I was in the playground sort of pretending to be a spider. And then I did bedtime stories with Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
I did and De Frere, this French film with Freddie Highmore, you know, 20 years ago or something. So
Iron Man 3 is coming around too, though. When they figure out you're a Marvel villain, that might be a different a new moment.
But he's too young for that still.
Fair enough. Maybe final question to wrap it up. I mean, we're talking in December. We're kind of at the point of the end of the year. Do you feel like, again, you were at Cannes and Venice this year. It's been kind of busy. Do you feel like you need to do some end of year reflection? Is there a way that you'll kind of shore yourself up as the year wraps up to take on what's next?
I think I do end of year reflection all the time anyway, you know. So yeah, I mean, well, the funny thing is, you know, I'm trying to spend more time with Monty and not work so much. Whereas, of course, you know, off the back of The Brutalist, you know, there's some good work out there, and I'd love to continue to do that.
Yeah.
So it's just always about balance and juggling things, really.
Yeah, the people who take their kids to sets when they're 2 and 3, it's that's so easy, and then once they're 8 and they have their whole lives, you can't. You got to stay home.
Yeah,
it's tricky.
He doesn't want to come to set. No. Tom's an actor as well, so, you know.
That's true.
This show is edited by Brett Fuchs and co-produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Thanks again to my co-host, David Canfield. Get the Prestige Junkie newsletter by going to theankler.com and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, where you can watch a video version of today's episode, and on Apple or anywhere else you get your podcast. Quick programming note, we'll have 2 more episodes this week. We've got a special live edition of the podcast coming this Wednesday with the director of Inside Out 2, Kelsey Mann, and then another bonus episode on Saturday. I told you it was a busy award season period. We are right there with it. So we will see you a few more times this week and then be back on our regular schedule after that.